Hello and welcome along to a special version of the VMTV Rugby Pod. It's always unique when Rob's in. We're giving the big money fee. Rob, how are you? How's the form?
I'm great, Stuart. Thanks for having me in. And I just want to clarify, zero fee. I told you to keep it. Spend it on some Halloween trick-or-treating.
All for the love of the game. Straight in, Saturday, Chicago. What an experience. You were back in 2016, Soldier Fields, for the first outing when Ireland beat New Zealand for the first time. Give us your memories from that day.
Stu, honestly, I think it was definitely top 3 days for me in an Irish jersey. There's some days I think it's number 1, other days, you throw it in number 2 because you'd have to put a Grand Slam ahead of it. But it was, it was unbelievably special, the history attached to it. The fact that we were in Chicago, was 80% Irish there, blue skies. We played a brilliant brand of rugby. We beat a champion team who haven't lost, I think, 18 consecutive games it was on the bounce. They were World Cup winners just before that. So, everything about it was very, very special. But I think the fact that it was the first time an Irish side beat the All Blacks, winning trophies is obviously amazing. But when you do something for the first time and there's that history attached to it, to the point that 9 years later we're still talking about it, that's very special.
And the last one on that, with the passing of Axel Foley, that sort of galvanised the team. And before, with the haka and the jersey presentation and everything standing in the figure of 8, was that the biggest sort of takeaway from that game outside of the result?
Yeah, I think all the emotion that was sort of attached to it. I think the game in Chicago has so many subplots of it along the whole way. But of course, the figure of 8, Axel, the emotion that had come with that, the Munster guys standing at the front of the figure of 8 right across. And then, I often remember after about 15 or 20 seconds into doing the figure of 8, it finally dawned on all the people in the crowd what we were actually doing. And then you could hear the collective gasps across Soldier Field. And then you sort of knew, okay, there's something very cool about today.
9 years on Saturday, this Ireland team off a defeat this time last year at home against New Zealand. We are hearing that full clean bill of health, Doris could be back, Aki, and a number of others. Where do you feel, I suppose a broader question, this Ireland side is at under Andy Farrell? A lot of guys coming back from the Lions, 16 and
a lot of guys coming back from the Lions. Obviously, you've got Andy coming back as head coach. He missed the last year. I think Six Nations was good without being great for them. So they're definitely, we're at a very clear, distinct point in time after a Lions tour and you're 2 years out from a World Cup, that this is a real rebuilding time. And I think coaches will often look at this as a bit of an inflection point in every 4-year cycle. So they will definitely have to have an eye on the future. They've got to start blooding new players. But there's I don't think there's any getting away from the fact that, this team is going to be a little bit undercooked going into the game. They're coming up against a team who's, very battled hardened, played an awful lot of test match rugby in the Rugby Championship this year. So, I think it's fair to say that we're probably not favourites going into it. But then I look back at 2016 and the game we played against there, we were very undercooked. We weren't favourites going into it. So, there's elements of it that, you can draw some synergies between the last game, but that's why we love sport, isn't it? Because you just never know what's going to happen on the day. And, there will be a large amount of Leinster players in this team at the weekend, and they'll have gotten a real kick up the backside in that game a few weeks ago, which, I think could probably stand to both Andy Farrell and the team.
It seems the wider public want change. I even spoke to Quinny last week about this, and every time there's an Ireland squad announced of 34 players, in my opinion, there's not too many guys on the outside thinking they're unlucky to miss out. So is that just the reality of things? We have a smaller pool of players and we're picking the best of what we've got. Do you think anyone's hard done by, or is it just people sometimes want something different that's not quite there?
Yeah, listen, I think this Irish team generally seems to pick itself more often than not.
And do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do, to be honest, because I think Andy Farrell and the coaches, by and large, pick the best team available every single time. Now you look at the sort of the age profile of the whole group, and you think, okay, there's some positions, there's some players who in 2 years' time are going to be, pushing on a little bit, and are they going to still be able to play at the same level they are now? So you do have to start blooding a few younger guys. But Stu, I think if we're being really honest about it, there's not too many younger players who, have forced their way into the team with really good performances or are putting their hand up. Okay, so yeah, in the backs you can say, Tom Farrell has been unbelievable for Munster this year. I think rightfully he's been added to the squad now, but the fact that he wasn't in the initial squad would insinuate that he's not really too much in their plans. Tommy O'Brien's performed very well. He'll get a chance this weekend now because Mac is out. Jamie Osborne has done well. He'll get a chance. And then, if you look in the pack, there's probably not too many guys who are jumping out in terms of, coaching.
Michael Milne may be a bit unlucky, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, definitely unlucky not to make the squad, of course. But in terms of that, you take the likes of, Ryan Baird now, who could potentially start this week, depending on where Tig plays. But he's not a player who's been banging the door down saying you have to find a spot for me somewhere in the team because I'm playing so well.
And then I can't let you away without speaking about the fly halves, obviously, as you smirk in your face. Jack Crowley, it looks like, well, we don't know, but he has certainly been the form fly half, I think, in my opinion, in most people's. Sam Prendergast, who we have this conversation about over the last 12 months, Rob. I know you're a big fan, and rightly so. Oh, we could be here all week, but the 12 months for him, up and down, some great days, but maybe some days that he hasn't quite delivered. And defensively, I think we know as well that he's not quite there, along with Jack Crowley in his parts of the game. Which way do you see that, Rob? And are you disappointed for Sam, or do you just think that's part of his young career when he goes forward to be that world-class 10? Do you see him still going that trajectory?
Listen, we have these conversations a lot, and I am a big fan of Sam, but I'm also a massive fan of Jack Crowley too. And I think sometimes we get caught in this world of not been argumentative, but been of real debate where you have to pitch one against the other, and it's binary. You're either a Sam fan or a Jack fan. That's not the case. Am I disappointed for Sam? No, because he's got to improve, and he's got to learn the lessons of last season where he probably let himself down a little bit. And
did you think he would let himself down, Rob?
Did I?
Yeah.
I think his physicality can definitely improve, and his defense can definitely improve. And that, that is probably a mindset more than, a technical piece to it. And then, you look at Jack, who he's vying against, defensively superb, so then the contrast is drawn out even more when you start comparing them against each other in terms of what one can do defensively and what the other can do defensively. And then, you take Sam's attacking game, and when he's behind a pack, giving him really good, quick ball, and he's playing on the front foot, and his distribution and kicking game is really good. There is times when he comes out on top in that area too. So, we've got two brilliant number 10s. I do think they're going to be going head to head, tit for tat for another couple of years.
So we can't not speak about it,
No, we can't. And
Jackson O'Gara,
we'll continue to speak about it, and it's as Irish rugby fans, it's something we love to do, is to constantly talk about the number 10 battle. But this battle is not going away anytime soon.
What about the All Blacks? They came second in points difference to the double World Cup champions in South Africa. They had some good days, but also, sure, they lost to Argentina for the first time there, and then in Wellington, that record points defeat against South Africa. We've just seen there a couple of days ago their assistant Jason Holland. He'll leave at the end of the campaign, and then before that, Liam McDonald did as well over the last 12 months. Do you think it must be an intense environment? I'm sure it is, but something doesn't seem quite right in that coaching ticket. Is that fair to say when 2 out of the 4 move on?
Yeah, they're probably still trying to find the balance of it all a little bit. It is a very, very high-pressured, high-stake job. And Scott Robinson, who probably wouldn't have had much exposure to international coaching before his time at Crusaders, is probably still trying to figure it all out and learn on the fly a little bit in terms of what is needed as himself as a head coach, but what's needed in the team around him and how important those assistant coaches are. There's no doubt in saying that this current All Blacks team is not what we would expect of an All Blacks team over the last 20 or 25 years. Okay, so there's been some real inconsistencies from them. To see the Springboks put 40 odd points on them at home it's unheard of.
Yeah.
So they are definitely going through a transitional phase as well, and it'll take them. It'll take them a little bit of time to find their way, and I'm sure both the New Zealand public and the coaches would like to be accelerating that improvement more so than that has happened in the last 12 to 18 months.
It's interesting that, and then you look at the team, they've still got the Barretts, Will Jordan, Satiti, Artie Savea, Cody Taylor, and then plenty of others in abundance, and now they've newcomers. So they do have all that quality. Yes, probably aging as well slightly.
Yeah, they do have the quality, and they will always have the quality. But it's funny, you look down through the Irish team sheet now, and you could match guys pretty evenly in terms of a head-to-head. So we have an awful lot of quality ourselves. I think, if you look back at, I often think that 2011-15 All Blacks team was probably the greatest rugby team of all time, certainly in my time of the last 30 years. And you go down through their team sheet and they just had world-class player one after the other. Real, big leadership figures. And I just think that in terms of their team at the moment, they're lacking that a little bit in terms of out-and-out world-class players who are at the peak of their powers. Yes, Artie Savea is one of them. Satiti is on the way up in terms of his stock rising. But I do think they're just lacking a little bit in that area.
For Ireland, you mentioned a couple of words earlier of undercooked. You can do nothing about that. But will they have learned from the 12 months ago where they just weren't good at home in Dublin and they'll be disappointed? That'll still be lurking in the back of their mind, won't it?
It still hurts, of course it will, because you don't get too many opportunities to play against the All Blacks. And the aura and the brand and the mystique around the All Blacks is still very much there in world rugby. Okay, you might not have the same level of fear when you play up against them now because, this team has beaten them 5 times in the last 10 odd years, but it's still the best place to judge yourself against the All Blacks. So they'll have learned an awful lot from that game in Dublin. I do think they'll have learned an awful lot, those who played against Munster and Croke Park. There's sort of a real wake-up call for them. And sometimes when you're undercooked, it puts a lot more onus on your mental preparation to make sure that you're 100% switched on and you're ready for the physical battle of it too. So, they're still full-time professionals. They would have trained hard. They would have gotten all their contact and all those up to the pitch that's what will be expected of them in international. So I still see this as been a very tight game.
Okay, and a couple of last ones there. Every coach and players, they all say better every day and evolving their game plan. I think Ireland back at 2024, their cohesion was unbelievable, what they did. Where do you see this Ireland team going forward? How do they get better at what they do? And do you see any surprises in their game plan, or is it no, we just need to get back or being so good at what we do, like if it's the simple stuff?
Yeah, I don't see too many surprises in the game plan. I think there's, teams are less ambitious in their own half.
Would you like to see anything different?
But I'd like to see the set piece get to an awful lot closer to 100% success rate. I think, the Six Nations last year, we didn't score as many tries as we had done in the past. And a lot of that is down to sort of our attacking shape just been a little bit clunky, and running lines and some handling errors just been off. So, I'd probably be trying to go back to the basics of that and getting our catch pass execution really good, our runnings lines really good, multiple different options at the line, which is what we associate with this Andy Farrell type of game and the way they play the game. I do think that we regressed in that in the last sort of 12 to 18 months, and I would like to see them get back to that before they start making any real big changes in terms of how they play the game.
And 2 years out from World Cup, do you think these guys will all still be there? And is it the right decision to get the likes of Aki starting at the weekend?
Yeah, it's hard to know, Stu, because, different players age at different rates, and body durability, goes quicker on some guys than it does others. So, I do think there's, if I was putting myself in the coach's situation, the only thing that matters is winning the game that weekend. And in order to do that, you have to pick your best team. And, in some instances where, you're down players who might be injured, the likes of Mac, where you can blood with a new, younger person, and Jamie, well, then that's very helpful because you're giving them game minutes and you're giving them exposure to international rugby, but while still picking your best team.
And do you think Jamie will start this weekend at 15, or could you see Jacob getting a go?
If you push me on it now, I'd say probably the back three will be James Lowe, Tommy, and Jamie Osborne.
Super. And a final one for you, Rob. How do you think the result will go at the weekend? And also in a total for the autumn series, what would you like to see and how many wins outside of the obvious of them all?
Yeah, I think this is the toughest November series this Irish team have had in a long, long time. In terms of this weekend, I think it would take something unbelievably special to turn New Zealand over, given what we've spoken about in terms of how match ready they are, how undercooked we are. But I still think it'll be a very tight game.
Do you mean that it'd be unbelievably special to beat them?
Yeah,
be that good?
It would be that good. There's nothing. I'm not completely writing us off, of course, but there's nothing to suggest that we should rock up and win this weekend.
Okay.
Yeah, I have no idea what the bookies might have the game. They're rarely too far wrong, but I would suggest that they have a pretty tight two. This Irish team is not a team who gets beaten out the gate anymore. They're too good for that. The South Africa game is going to be very, very difficult as well. They probably don't tour as well as maybe the Kiwis do. And then you've got the Aussies with Joe coming back, who will have them very well prepped, who have really improved their performances in the last 6 months or so. So, it could be. I'd be shocked if it was 3 wins from 3. I suspect it'll be 1 from 3 of those big games, and I'd be shocked if it was 0 from 3.
Great stuff, Rob. 19 minutes, 32 of pure gold, and we look forward to having you in studio on Saturday. Always a pleasure. Thanks so much, Rob.
Look forward to it, Stuart. Good man. Thank you.